Thailand. Spectacular rocky islands. Fine-grained sandy beaches. Turquoise blue water. Just how you imagine a holiday destination more than 9,000 kilometers away from cold old Germany. And this is the reality. Tourists flocking to sites like the famous James Bond Island, where Roger Moore fought the bad guys as secret agent 007. Today, it's all about selfies and self-expression.
When you see these guys walking around in swimming trunks, a little undignified, I'd say.
Terrible. But it was to be expected. It was marketed that way.
Thailand's dream beaches are suffocating in plastic garbage. Untreated wastewater is discharged straight into the sea. Tens of thousands of snorkelers explore the underwater landscape and cause irreparable damage to the sensitive coral reefs by trampling all over them.
In the last 2 years, we found that more than 77% damage or heavy damage. So we expect that if we don't do anything, the problem will more and more.
So how much damage does mass tourism cause? That's our question. The first stop on our journey is the town of Phuket in the south of Thailand. Most vacationers here head to the beach of Patong. The wide sandy bay fascinated us when we came here for the first time 8 years ago. Fun on the beach and a bit of adventure to boot. Vacation dreams. But the number of tourists coming to Thailand has more than doubled since then. Now it's more than 34 million people every year. What changes has that brought about? The next morning, we see the downside of mass tourism. Local diving instructors regularly fish garbage out of the sea by the sackload. Their business depends on keeping the natural environment as intact as possible. What do they find in the sea? Torn nets from the trawlers emptying the sea of Patong of fish. Of course, fresh fish is a food staple for both the locals and the hordes of tourists. But diving instructor Dave Wilson says the fishing nets are endangering the coral reefs off the coast.
So it depends on the type of net. If it's a rope type net, then they can colonize that. But if it's a plastic type net, then it causes a lot of damage. Nylon type nets, they cause a lot of damage to the corals.
The nets settle on the fragile corals and literally rip them up. Dave Wilson has found a lot today, in addition to all the other plastic garbage.
Chang bottles, single-use plastic. This is the biggest threat to the environment at the moment, in a lot of people's opinion. And so we also got plastic bags. These are the wrappers that the plastic bottles come in. So with the wind, they just get blown away into the sea. And yes, here we have again more examples of that.
And so the garbage generated by millions of tourists is increasingly choking Phuket's once beautiful beaches. Even the monkeys have learned to drink from plastic cups. The internationally renowned marine ecologist Thon Thamrongnawasawa has been studying the effects of plastic waste on the ecosystem for the last decade.
The first thing is a big one. It's just come with the current and cover the coral. So if the plastic cover the coral can breathe, the coral can get the air, the water movement is stopped because it's covered like a human. If you cover the plastic over your head, you cannot survive. That is one big problem. And also the net. Plastic is mean also the fishing net or something like that, nylon or something like that, crack to the coral. And when the current take it out, the current will strong enough to crack all the coral.
We want to find out what consequences the increasing environmental pollution caused by tourism has for the coral reefs off Phuket. So we join a diving trip to the island of Koh Tao. But we can forget about spending a quiet day alone in this natural paradise. There are dozens of ships out there. In 2010, we went to Koh Tao for the first time and found an underwater world of enchanting beauty. A leopard shark, harmless to humans. Huge sponges and colourful corals on the seabed. So how's it looking now? What has changed? Our first impression. The underwater world is still in many places species-rich and beautiful. But we were still more impressed by the diving here in 2010 than we are today. Now the water is a lot cloudier, and we find garbage in many places on the seabed. And the coral is showing the effects of climate change as well. If the water is too warm, it eats away the sensitive corals. But sewage, garbage, and too many divers are also leaving their mark. A carpet of plastic waste is floating on the surface of the water. The current has pushed the garbage from the open sea into the bay. It's becoming more and more common, we learn. In the late afternoon, we return to the fantastic island world off Phuket. For the next day, we booked a trip to the Peepee Islands, probably the most beautiful islands in southern Thailand. We start with some shopping in Phuket Harbour. We're supposed to buy bathing shoes that will protect us from sharp-edged corals. A pair costs around €8, and a lot are being sold. At last we set off for the world-famous islands. The music on board fights with the sound of the 500 horsepower engine. On the way, we stop at a coral reef for a bit of snorkeling.
Take care of yourself, okay? And our mat.
Few people on board have ever had anything to do with masks and snorkels, and a lot of them can't swim either. One speedboat after another ferries the snorkelers to the reefs. Thousands of tourists every day are trashing the fragile reef. For decades, coral polyps have built up the reef millimetre by millimetre. Now, a lot of that is destroyed in just a few minutes.
It's very hard to make that people understand how to behave. I understand that they don't want to harm the coral, but they don't know, they don't understand. They come from inland China, inland Korea, whatever, that might be the country that never have a coral reef before. So they don't have any understanding about the coral reef because in their country, there is no coral reef.
The Peepee Islands are actually a specially protected national park. But since the organisers of the day trips discovered them for themselves, millions of tourists have been visiting the picturesque rock islands and killing off nature bit by bit. Next stop, the so-called Monkey Bay, a real tourist attraction. Today we see 3 monkeys on the rocks, with tourists on 6 speedboats crowding around the best photo spot.
There's another one there, right?
Last year we have more than 2.3 million visitors at the Peepee Island, which is only 14 square kilometers of the area. And the coral reef is only 2 square kilometers. So you can expect that very crowded. I think the Peepee Island may be the most visited coral reef in the world.
The consequences are devastating. Andrew Hewitt runs a dive centre on the Peepee Islands. He isn't prepared to accept that. Hewitt and his team have been monitoring the state of the underwater world for years, repeatedly diving to count the corals and document the damage. Again today, Andrew Hewitt is underway with his underwater camera in the popular diving areas.
We need to respect that the more people at a location, the more impact it's going to have on coral reefs. So there has to be a maximum limit that we can have of people visiting an area at any one particular time. If we just let it go and let people do whatever they want, it can get out of control, and you can see there's a big difference in the health of the corals when there's too many people.
For the first time, the Thai authorities have reacted. The world-famous Maya Bay, where the movie The Beach with Leonardo DiCaprio was shot, has been closed to tourists for several months to give the corals a chance to recover.
I think I have mixed feelings about it. I think it's very good that we do things like that. But if you just close one area, then you have to expect that all the people that go to one area are then going to go to another area and put pressure on another area.
You can see what happens here on the main island, Peepee Islands. Since Maya Bay has been closed, the day trippers are brought to this beach. By noon, it turns into a gigantic speedboat parking lot. After a selfie at the beach, it's a short walk into the village. And maybe some fast food before we move on to the next attraction. So what do the people who live on Peepee Islands get from the day trippers? We visit the Tao restaurant, which offers Thai cuisine at reasonable prices. But the owner says he has few customers. Although Peepee Islands is overrun by tourists, he's fighting for his existence.
Hardly any tourists come here. The restaurants that have the most guests are on the beach, where the boats are moored. The tourists always want to keep an eye on their boats. They're afraid if they come into the village, they might get lost.
Peepee Islands is the only island here that is permanently inhabited. The thousands of day trippers have not brought prosperity to the people here. The big tourism companies earn money from the excursions, but the locals often only have jobs at the Thai minimum wage of just under €9 per day. The interior of the island looks like many places on Phuket. Waste disposal is a big problem. This old man is drying fish, one of the local staple foods. He sells it to his neighbors, he tells us. He says he's doing it because he doesn't know what else he can do to earn a living. He tells us the flies are particularly annoying, so he has to keep the fish in plastic bags to keep them away. Low incomes are not the only problem the people on Peepee Islands have. The island's exposed location means it's also prone to natural disasters. We notice signs saying Evacuation Route. If a tidal wave, a tsunami, is heading towards the island, both locals and tourists are supposed to flee to safety. But where does the escape route actually lead? We follow the signs. After a few meters, it ends at an iron gate, a death trap in an emergency. The escape routes were set up after the last tsunami with international donations. But today the danger seems to be forgotten, and not only on the Peepee Islands. December 2004. 700 people died as a result of the tsunami on Peepee Islands. A few hundred kilometers away in the tourist town of Koh Tao, it claimed more than 3,000 victims. Holidaymakers filmed it with their video cameras. But today, almost nothing in Koh Tao recalls the catastrophe. The force of the tidal wave hurled this Coast Guard patrol boat a kilometre into the hinterland. It was left there as a memorial, and the Tsunami Memorial Museum was built right next to it.
This 14 years ago, and
the memorial lives from donations, Ratchnakul Tongtet, the curator, tells us. These photos from December 2004 show relaxed bathers, and in the background, the incoming tidal wave. The museum does not only want to remind people, it also wants to make them more aware of the danger, because there is little time left after a seaquake before the tidal wave reaches the coast. This graph shows how the 2004 tsunami spread. But what have the authorities in the tourist resort of Koh Tao learned from the catastrophe? We notice that almost the entire coast is covered with large hotel complexes. The guests there would be the first victims. Are the hotels prepared? Are there any emergency plans?
Many hotels are near the beach, and they have no any plan to move the people if the tsunami come, because if we don't know when will it come, and we don't know how many times that we have to leave.
And what about the escape routes that were established with international aid after 2004? Do the people here in Koh Tao take the danger seriously? We follow the signs again. We're not far from the nearest shelter. Thousands of inhabitants and tourists should be able to find safety there. We eventually find it. It's full of furniture. And there's an elevator for the disabled, but it's derelict. The power hasn't worked for a long time.
After the tsunami, we have many signs for evacuation route, but now many of the sign is broken and no organization that fixes it.
So the evacuation route doesn't work anymore?
Now it have the old sign, but many of it is broken, and many of it is not clear where the way that we can move. Right?
The lessons of the 2004 disaster seem to have been forgotten. We continue on to the next destination of our journey, the Phang Nga National Park. Our excursion here is well organized. First, we explore the small bays by paddleboat. That's a source of income for the locals. A boatsman here earns about 13 euros per day, which by Thai standards is a wage they can live on. Our next stop on the tour is a cave. Now at low tide, when the water level is low, we can pass through the cave to the interior of the island. But we're not alone here either. Dozens of tourists from other excursion boats are also here, marvelling at the bizarre rock formations and the mighty mangrove roots. The travel brochure says we'll get lunch here at Koh Tao, an original Muslim fishing village built on stilts in the sea. The original village quickly turns out to be a collection of tourist restaurants and souvenir shops. After all, 10 million visitors pass through here every year. All of them pay the tour operators a flat rate for their lunch, so the locals get little benefit from it. After lunch, we look at the souvenir shops. Shark's teeth are very popular this year. This one costs around 40 euros, but German customs duties will increase that price several-fold. Sharks are a threatened species, so, just like corals and shells, they are subject to the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, and the import of these souvenirs to Germany is prohibited. Otherwise, you can buy t-shirts, caps and scarves, just like everywhere else. Finally, hidden at the back of the village, we find the locals' huts. They are Muslims, so perhaps they are bothered by the lightly dressed Europeans. This local asks us to buy a souvenir from her. She lives off the trade, she says, and has no other income.
Okay.
2 hours later, we head off to the high point of our excursion. This is probably the most famous rock in the world. Roger Moore, alias James Bond, shot scenes for the movie The Man with the Golden Gun here. But today the villains are all gone. All that is left are thousands of tourists who all want just one thing, a photo, a selfie, to show that they were there. How do you like it here?
Yeah, it's okay.
It's okay?
Okay. And all the people?
Terrible, but it was to be expected. It was marketed this way.
What do you think?
Same here.
The same, but still beautiful.
We should have come another time, perhaps in the morning or evening.
But would that have helped? The crowds of tourists surge through the small island from early in the morning until late in the evening.
When you see these guys walking around in swimming trunks, a little undignified, I'd say.
At the other end of the island, there are more souvenir stalls selling the same travel souvenirs for which the seas are plundered. Like this tiger shell. James Bond Island in the Phang Nga National Park, or Koh Ping, as the island is really called, is a natural gem that has degenerated into a tourist hotspot. We set off for the last stop of our journey before we return to Phuket. We reach the island of Koh Tao, off the southeast coast of Thailand. When you see these beaches, you can hardly believe that Koh Tao was a prison island until 1947. Today, it's more about wellness. Thai massage is a specialty here. Young people and scuba divers are particularly drawn to Koh Tao. We remember the pictures we shot here in 2010. There was an abundance of fish. A bull shark crossed our path. You shouldn't get too close to them. Sometimes they also attack people. Back to the present. Simon Dowling and Dorothy Lee from the environmental association Eco Koh Tao take us out to sea. They want to show us what's changed since we first came here. A whole fleet of boats awaits us at the dive site. Diving is a mass event here. Thousands crowd the few dive sites. Suddenly, we come across a whale shark, the biggest fish in the world. It's harmless to humans. The divers are completely over the moon. But now we see the consequences here. Destroyed coral.
There are definitely too many tourists here. If we could limit the number of tourists or change to a marine park status, it would help a lot. And limit fishing as well. Fishing is also a big impact on our reefs.
We sail back to Koh Tao. We're always under observation because our shoot on the island is strictly monitored by the tourist police. We're meant to just show the good parts. We're secretly shooting these pictures. The garbage of many tourists ends up in the island's interior, in unofficial dumps like this. The wastewater flows untreated into the sea in many places. 1.5 million tourists visit Koh Tao every year. The sea is polluted, which also damages the corals. In the afternoon, we meet Dorothy Lee from Eco Koh Tao again. She's welding a metal construction, the point of which is not immediately apparent.
I'm building a steel structure in the shape of a triple-masted Chinese junk for our coral garden in a junkyard, an artificial reef.
This is the plan. Coral branches are placed on the metal structures. Over time, they grow into an artificial reef. It's hard work. Individual pieces of healthy coral are tied to the construction, where they grow over the years. Many diving tourists now look at the artificial reef in awe.
But if we do our part to build and expand the artificial reefs, then I think at least it gives the other dive sites a chance to recover.
As we drive back from Koh Tao to Phuket, we think, this could be one way into the future. Artificial coral reefs as an attraction for diving tourists to take the pressure off the natural environment. It's a great idea that has already become reality on Koh Tao. On the way back, we constantly meet the fishing boats that are overfishing the sea. Every morning, fully laden trawlers call at Chalong, Phuket's fishing port. Their catches are offloaded by the ton. Millions of tourists want one thing above all else: fresh sea fish on their plates. The fish are sorted according to size on the quayside.
When the ship come and we sell like wholesale, yeah. So dealer will come here and buy, and they will go to the market and sell again.
Fish has become expensive on Phuket. This is especially true for the larger fish, which go directly to the tourist restaurants. The smaller ones are sold on the market. That's the real problem, says the buyer.
Restaurant, they use the big size, So here, got many but small size.
Business is tough. In order to catch the coveted big fish, the trawlers stay at sea for days on end. The fishermen themselves earn the least from this business. Many are Burmese, guest workers from neighbouring Myanmar. They get just 2 or 3 euros a day, they say. But nobody will confirm that in front of the camera. The tourists who admire the fresh fish in Phuket know nothing about all this. Parrotfish, for example, typically inhabit coral reefs. When they are caught, the nets destroy the corals. The fish is bought and then prepared in the restaurant for a small fee.
Look good, yeah. Because we're hungry.
And on the beach, right behind the restaurant, this place looks like so many other places. Waste and sewage from restaurants flowing untreated into the sea. What would be the best way to further develop tourism in Thailand? The Pacific Asia Travel Organization, which is committed to responsible tourism, says the government in far-off Bangkok is planning to increase the number of tourists to 50 million per year. Large companies earn the most from the hordes of tourists, while the people here at Patong Beach work in the kitchens for minimum wage or sell chilled drinks on the beach. It's already crowded enough at Patong Beach in high season. More tourists? Patong's mayor, Shalam Nukkapsup, is aware that tourism is the most important source of income. Nevertheless, she's worried about the plans coming out of Bangkok.
There's a lot going on in high season. I think it's okay right now. But if more come, it'll be difficult. As far as the water supply, sewage, garbage, and transport are concerned, we think we're already at the limit.
The country needs rational and sustainable tourism development policy, she says. Development that takes not only economic interests, but also the interests of people, nature, and the environment into account. Otherwise, Thailand will soon cease to be a tropical paradise.